Okay, hello. This is Alvin. And today's topic that I'm or debate that I'm focusing on is do video games cause violence and aggression? And here is one of my friends. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jonathan.
Yeah. So first, I'm just gonna describe the issue and state the competing positions. So the topic of do video games cause violence? Uh, it has been debated for years by researchers, psychologists, and media. Video games are an activity that many of us play from adults to children, and however, it's been associated with mass shootings, with physical assault, which is on the negative side.
Mm-hmm.
And video games seem to get blamed for violent crimes, bullying, etc. And yeah, that's one of the positions. However, there's another position which is uh video games that have no correlation to violence and aggression. They're actually a way to let out aggression. They play a they play a part to make our lives more enjoyable, to pass time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I like. You have any thoughts on this, Jonathan? I know you play video games a lot as well. So
Yeah, I,
yeah,
I
go ahead.
I just think that uh, we should thank video games and the people who create video games, right? Because it allows people to escape this rough world that we call life, right? And
Uh
yeah,
huh.
you get to just transport yourself and not be yourself for a minute, you know. And I
Yeah,
feel like that's the perfect thing.
I 100% agree with that as well. I also played video games, especially in these rough times with Corona. Like
Mm-hmm.
I I I played a bit of games, and I noticed a lot of the young, like my brothers are like both 15. They're twins. They both play video games, and a lot of their friends engage in these video games. And yeah, I see it as a bit of a positive here, but I can understand the other point. But especially with the coronavirus, a lot of people have played video games, but like you said, yeah, it is a bit of a escape for
Exactly.
us.
Exactly.
So so yeah, I'm also gonna I'm gonna before we discuss it further, I'm just gonna state the rationale for each position, and or maybe I guess I'll mention why I chose to do this topic, which is it's kind of related to yeah, I like I mentioned before, my brothers play a lot of video games, and I throughout my childhood played a lot of video games. And yes, Jonathan, you played video games
Mm-hmm.
throughout your childhood as well. Yes.
100%.
Do you mind saying what kind of video games you played? Like, what were your favorite type of video games?
Yeah, back when I was young, my favorite type of video games were superhero games where
Uh
I could
huh.
I could live out my dream of being a superhero.
Right.
Racing games, right?
Yeah.
Super Mario. I loved
Uh
Super
huh.
Mario. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, those type of
Uh,
games.
how about any violent sort of video games like Halo, Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, or even Mario? I know it has a bit of cartoon violence. So, you
Mm-hmm.
notice any of the violence uh, from when you were a kid?
Yeah. I seen violence in GTA, right? Grand Theft Auto.
Of course. Yeah.
I seen violence in Halo, 100%. Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, this is a tough subject when it comes to
Uh,
violence in video games.
yeah. Do you mind? I know you. Halo. I'm pretty sure we've talked. We've been friends for a long time, so I know Halo. I think Halo you mentioned is one of your favorite games. Do you mind elaborating on what type of game Halo is or Call of Duty for the viewers who may not understand
Mm-hmm.
what they are. So
So so Halo and Call of Duty are first person shooters, right? So basically
yeah.
it's when the camera is just focused on you're in a first person's point of view and the camera is just focused on your hands and you basically
Uh-huh.
get to grab a weapon, a gun, a knife, and
Yeah.
you in Halo you're mostly killing aliens and in Call of Duty you're mostly killing people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, those are pretty violent. So it very,
Yeah.
very relates to this subject here. So okay, now I'm gonna give a rationale. So I'm just gonna explain so I did some research on this topic. So
Mhm.
I did some research supporting the argument that that it does cause violence for like children and adults, and then I also did some research saying that it does not or has no relation to causing any violence. So first, I'm just gonna give a rationale for why it does, or maybe it could cause some violence.
Mhm.
Okay, so when looking at these video games, like I mentioned before, it seems they cause a lot of aggression and violence. Like I meant, we even mentioned the games that the research mentions, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, even cartoon violence games like Super Mario. However, the issue that arises that the researchers have seen is that the people who play these games they may start to act out on what they've seen or done in these video games.
Mhm.
Uh, their focus is on the children and adults. They think that some people may be influenced by the violent things they see in these video games. Also, the researchers believe playing these violent video games may lead to letting out some aggression, like bullying other children in school or causing more fighting amongst students.
Mhm.
They also mean also something pretty interesting that I found is that they think that playing these video games will make will desensitize people to these violent crimes, so they won't feel anything when they see violent crimes in real life. Or so like perhaps if they saw someone getting hurt, they wouldn't do anything or would have a basically an antisocial reaction, which is like say someone's getting stabbed, they might laugh at it by playing. That's another thing that this research mentioned, and it also said like if someone gets so used to seeing people like dying or shooting people in video games,
Mhm.
uh, they become more desensitized, like I said before, and it said it could make them more aggressive, so they're more likely to attack someone or like even worse, like assault someone. And yeah, another aspect it mentioned is that video games a bit controversial, but it could cause mass shootings and murders. Video games may have an influence on that. It could make children want to pick up guns and use it, especially in like places in America where guns are pretty readily available, which is another topic to discuss, but
Mhm.
not for this. But yeah, so yeah, what do you think about that? That's the rationale for the side that says video games do cause violence.
Yeah, when you were saying that stuff about like kids like role playing what they see in the video games or what they do, especially for a game like Grand Theft Auto where you could legit shoot, kill, steal,
Right.
do drugs, you could do whatever you want, right? And
Yeah.
I get that. I get that from that point of view, from what you explained. Like, I never thought about it that way. But when you explained it like that, I totally understood. I see it from that point of view where if another person is playing a game like Grand Theft Auto, where you're shooting and stealing and killing, and them wanting to go do that in the street, especially from a young mind, right, which
Uh
is trying
huh.
to be soaked with whatever knowledge it can get, and unfortunately, that might be the wrong knowledge.
Yeah. So it's good that you can see this point as well.
Mhm.
So I'm also gonna speak about the rationale of the side that it doesn't cause any violence,
Mhm.
and feel free to add on to this one.
Mhm.
Uh, so one of the things that the research has noticed is okay, so they that a lot of people they blame video games for like these violence and assaults on or even bullying in kids at schools and whatever. But there could be all other factors that could be involved, such as like let's say their parents aren't the greatest. Their
Mhm.
parents are very abusive. Uh, Another thing is maybe their social economic status is a bit lower, so meaning they it's a lot harder for them to live. They don't have as much it's harder for them to get acquire like food, etc., clothes. So it's a harder life, like say
Mhm.
living on the streets or something. So that could also be one of the influences of aggression and violence, because they're literally fighting for their lives. So may make them want to steal or engage in like violent behavior just to survive. Uh, yeah, and another thing that is on more of the side of that video games don't cause aggression is that sometimes maybe when we play these video games we let out the aggression in the video games instead of letting them out in real life. So I can
Mhm.
admit to doing that. I when I used to play wrestling games, I also did that. I beat other guys up in the video game. Yeah, let out my aggression, or like I know people do this. Do you have you done this? Let out any aggression in video games?
100%. 100%. Wrestling video games, uh, GTA, right? Halo, you know, where you actually get to like, put like that's a lot of things people don't realize about those games. You could put the gun down, right? You don't always have to be shooting, right? You could just straight up just like box somebody or something like that, not as violent
Yeah,
as killing somebody.
right. Yeah, so yeah, it's like that's one of the that's a good I think that's a good argument that for video games.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I would also say like it's a it's a good way to interact with friends and friends online.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to say that because of the times right now, I notice my brothers connecting with their friends, especially during the lockdown season with through video games and their online parties. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's an aspect that is more of a strength of playing video games.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and like you said, I think this should also be part of it. It's a good way of escaping and like get like living a fantasy life kind of as you're playing as a character.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Exactly.
it's not really you, but it's a good way to escape. Like for example, like when watching a movie. So yeah, I totally see that point of view as well.
Mm-hmm. And
So
even what you said about it being you playing, you're noticing your brothers playing with their friends online, right, during these trying times. It's also the
uh-huh.
safest way, right? Especially because of now, right? Because of COVID and everything. It's the safest way to communicate with your friends without actually having to be next to each other and, messing up the rules.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that we've spoken a little bit about the rationales for each side, I'm now gonna share some evidence that I found for
Mm-hmm.
both sides. So first, I'm gonna start off with the some evidence saying that video games do cause violence, and what feel free to say if you find any things that seem odd to you or feel like weaknesses of this study. Like feel free to call them out after,
Mm-hmm.
because that's also something. I'm trying to we're trying to do here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then I'll read each one, and then let me know what you think of it. And then if you don't have anything to say, I'll just move on to the next one. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Okay.
Okay, so the first article that I found, which is on the side that video games do cause violence. So this article it compared two different cultures, which is the Japanese and American cultures, and it compared the influence of violent video games on children. The reason they chose to compare the Japanese and American cultures, they wanted to see if the aggression for video games would be the same across both cultures. So this study had three samples. One sample from Japan had 12 to 15-year-olds. The other sample in Japan had 13 to 18-year-olds, while the USA sample had students from like 7 to 11 years old. Each sample had to state their three favorite violent video games and say how much violence each game had. Then the researchers monitored the children for 3 to 6 months, and the students basically, when they were interviewed again, self-reported their aggressive their aggressive incidents like fights,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And the findings indicated after about 3 months for those students who played video games across all three samples that there had been more aggression and the violence actually lasted longer for the younger children in the samples. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on this article here?
Yeah. So you said it was with Japan, right?
Yeah,
Japan and the United States.
it had three samples. Two of them were 12 to 15-year-olds, and the other one was 18-year-olds, and those were both in Japan. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other sample was 12 to 15, sorry, 7 to 11-year-olds in the USA. So yeah,
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy.
what's crazy?
The fact that like you said USA had the USA video games. Can you say them again, please?
Oh, they just stated their three favorite violent video games.
Yeah.
So
What were they? Was one of them GTA by any chance?
yeah,
Yeah.
of course, that's
Yeah.
one of the most popular ones. Grand Theft Auto
Yeah.
5.
Yeah. Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Because I was gonna say with the United States, that's probably the number one hitter
Uh
for
huh.
most violent video games, GTA, and it's just crazy that even still today, right? That like GTA is still the highest violent video game.
Uh huh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
So, do you notice any things that it might be off with this article? Something that may make this evidence seem like they're reaching or looking for something to say that video games do cause violence? If you don't, it's okay.
Yeah, it's not reaching me right now.
That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm just gonna say what I think, and
Mm-hmm.
so something of note is that for two of the samples that were in Japan, it compared 12 to 15-year-olds and 13 to 18-year-olds. But in America or USA, the sample had 7 to 11-year-olds. So I find that quite odd.
Mm-hmm.
What like I feel like why not do the same ages? Why are they comparing different ages for video games?
That's a good point.
Um, and another thing that might be a bit of a criticism is it said violence lasted a lot longer for the younger children in the samples. But again, I maybe this is because younger children may be more influenced by video games, or again, it could be something at their home and something causing them issues in their house, or like their parents, or
Mm-hmm.
bullying, etc. So I think those things need to be looked at a little bit more. And even they only follow them for after 3 months or 3 to 6 months. So I feel like maybe if they had another follow-up assessment maybe 2 years or a year after, maybe the results might differ. So that's a little bit of a criticism for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm gonna share this another one that supports that video games do cause violence.
Okay.
So this one is more of a qualitative study, which means it's more focused on, like, it's less people. It's only focused on 3 students.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this one looked at the young students who engaged in heavy gaming, and it noticed they had the a lower school performance. They had communication issues, problems in the classroom, and they are very socially awkward. They couldn't get along with much of their peers, and
Mm-hmm.
the peers of the gamers and the teachers of the three. Yeah, there's 3 gamers here. So the teachers mentioned they all had verbal problems. They
Mm-hmm.
are more mischievous in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
One of the classmates mentioned one of the heavy gamers uh, bullied her because he broke her glasses during a soccer game due to to a foul, and two gamers who they tended to be lonely and prefer to stay at home, and yeah, and that's basically it. It just looks at 3 participants here, and it just looks at how they're affected in school, but based on the opinions of their peers and teachers. So, what do you think about this one?
I think for this one, it's relatable in a way for me,
Uh huh.
right? Because the one kid you said that likes to play video games, but is very quiet and likes to be by himself, right, or herself.
Mhm.
I don't remember which gender, but
Uh
yeah,
huh.
I feel like I can relate to that. You rather be with the video games more than people, right? Because sometimes people gotta
Yeah,
realize, you know, being friends with people isn't for everybody, right? Sometimes you gotta just be by yourself, you
and
know?
and I do know, and that's perfect that you said that because that's what we call in psychology an introvert. People
Mm-hmm.
who like to stay. I'm sure you've heard of it. Have you?
Yep, introvert, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's also one of my criticisms here is that these kids are being criticized here, but maybe that's just their personality. They may be introverted and prefer to stay by themselves. So I don't really think that that's a good uh, criticism of the kids here. And
Exactly.
yeah, and so some other criticisms I've known, I mean I've seen in this article here is that there's only 3 heavy gamers here, so there's only 3 participants to look at. So, and which they all had self-control problems, verbal problems, and and behavioral problems like being mischievous in class. So, the criticism here is that this this is such a small sample size. Like, imagine you had 3 people, let's say you had 3 gamers from Canada, or like from our classroom when we were kids. Like, it could be quite different. Some of us were quite talkative, and we still
Mm-hmm.
played a lot of video games too. And
Mm-hmm.
it even mentions how the heavy gamers were identified as those who played for games for 4 or more hours. And I know for a fact that I played more than 4 hours as a kid.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and I'm pretty sure we were pretty uh, talkative. We weren't really. I don't think we were more intro, and I don't think we were pretty mischievous at all in our classrooms.
No, 100%. Like, video games made us actually talk more.
Yeah, in a way, yeah, we
Yeah,
we did.
yeah. To find out, like, which friend liked which video game, if you guys shared the same love for the same video game, you know?
Yeah, you're right. That is a good point. That it's a conversation starter.
Exactly.
It's a good thing to talk about. And then another criticism I have here is um one of the students mentioned how the heavy gamer student broke her glasses and during a soccer game due to a foul. But I think that could just be kids having competition, and it could have been an accident
Mm-hmm.
to foul. So I think that's also sort of a reach and maybe a criticism of this article.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Accidents happen, right?
Yeah,
Especially while playing a sport.
exactly. So yeah, I'm also gonna mention one more article on the side of video games uh, do cause violence because I feel like it should be included, even though I was only supposed to look at two, but I think this is pretty relevant here. And
Mm-hmm.
then we'll move on to the side that video games do not cause any violence. So this article that I found, there's 257 uh, college students, and they made them play violent video games, and they're basically testing their heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
So they noticed that even when playing these games, these violent, so let me rephrase this. Let me just talk about this properly. So they got these volunteers and they made these them play violent video games for 20 minutes, and they wanted to see if they'd become less physiologically aroused by the violence.
Mm-hmm.
So this focused on the desensitization to violence thing that I mentioned a bit earlier, so they'd feel like calm or like feel nothing when they saw violence in real life. So the study looked so they played the video games for 20 minutes, and after this, uh, they were they uh they were shown something like a violent script or a violent movie
Mm-hmm.
in what takes place in real life, and they wanted to see the reaction to it. And what they noticed is that those who played the violent video games had a lower heart rate, so they seemed more calm when seeing other people get assaulted or murdered in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's on a although it's on a screen here because can't really murder someone
Yeah.
like right. So
Exactly.
yeah. But the point of this article, it said is that the exposure to video games make people desensitized, so and it can increase aggression as they become more desensitized because they don't feel anything. So we did talk about this a little bit, but this was just the article that influenced me to talk about this. So what do you think about this one?
With desensitizing people to violence, right?
Yeah, that's
While
what they're claiming.
mm-hmm.
They're claiming that violent video games desensitize people, and they use the heart. They said because when the participants played these violent video games, they had a lower heart rate when they were viewing real violence. So they believe that there's going to be desensitization to the violence, and the article even showed that their heart rate was a lot lower when seeing this violence, and yeah, they think it can cause people to become more aggressive as they won't feel any emotions to violence or won't act in the right way. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I feel like with that article they should have shown, like, if there was possible way to show like a real, like, say if in the video game somebody got shot, right? If
Uh
you
huh.
were to show the same person and check their heart rate to see an actual person get shot, right? I think you would see that they aren't desensitized, right? I think the only reason they see that the heart rate's low while they're playing the video game is because the video game characters like the graphics are good, but you could still tell that's a video game, right? You still can't tell that that's an actual real looking person, you know? So then I feel
Right.
like they still
Yeah.
know that
Yeah, and
that reality and, the difference.
yeah, and even when they were also shown like right after the video game, they were showing like a clip of someone dying, and or someone getting assaulted or in a violent way,
Mm,
and they tested their heart rate. But yeah, again, you can't. I agree with that criticism because it's still a screen. It's not really happening. I feel if someone saw it in real life, it'll be a lot different. It's
exactly.
just the shock of something happened. So yeah, I think that's a great criticism that you pointed out, and I actually, to be honest, is something that I miss. So good job there.
Oh, you're good, man. You're good. This is all you.
Okay, so now we're gonna move on to the articles that say video games uh don't cause violence. Okay,
Okay.
so the first article I'm gonna mention. So this one had it had four different types of analysis, which and it showed evidence that video games are not related to any violent crimes or murders
Mm-hmm.
or assault, etc. So I'm going to focus on three of the analyses to show that they don't cause any violence.
Okay.
So the first the first analysis it looked at game sales and violent crime, and it looked at game sales from 1978 to 2011, and it related it to assault and homicide rates from 1978 to 2011. And what they found was that the annual video game sales were unrelated to the rates of homicide and assaults.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's just one of the analyses. So the second analysis, this one compared video games with monthly reports of aggravated assaults, and again, there was no relation to homicide. It also looked at both violent video games for teenagers and cartoon violence for younger teens, and still found no relations. And in this analysis, something of note is that they found like video games tend to peak in the winter, so like September to December
Mm-hmm.
time. That's when all the games come out, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
And it noticed that uh, even though the game sales peaked at these times, the crime was highest in the summer. So that's another way to say like it may not have any correlation with crime.
Exactly.
Uh, the another analysis. This one is where I was gonna mention these popular video games, but it looked at the most popular violent video games in sales and in relation to violent acts. So it looked at Call of Duty Black Ops, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and GTA 5, and it wanted to see if their sales within that year had any spike in violent acts or crime.
Mm-hmm.
And this I find this one very important as media, uh, uh, even like researchers have blamed and video games and for like these games. Even my parents, I would say, they think these
Mm-hmm.
video games, yeah, they think these video games such as Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty may be causing these these acts of violence. However, this analysis showed that they looked at the crime from 1 to 12 months after these video games released, and again, they found that aggravated assault and homicide rates tended to show a decrease following the release of these three violent video games.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so I think this kind of aligns with the thing what we said that maybe people let out these aggression in these video games.
Exactly. Exactly. Maybe they don't even realize how much like future killers they've actually stopped. you know, by letting
Yeah,
them play the video game, right? And they're like, oh, I don't need to do it on real people when I could just play this video game.
exactly.
Yeah, like imagine if those video games weren't there, like GTA and San Andreas and Black Ops and all that stuff. Maybe you might have more crime because people would be like, "Oh, maybe I need to just go do it in real life because I have nothing to release that stress."
Right. Um, sorry. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think they are a way to let out your aggression, maybe even uh stress for some of these people,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it has stopped a lot of
Future killers.
violence
Mm-hmm.
here. Yeah, that's a good point. That's something I didn't even think of, man. So yeah. So in general, what do you think of these three analysis? Do you, does any one of them stick out to you? Does the last one stick out?
Yeah,
Anything?
yeah, that last one, cause
Uh-huh.
you know, cause the reason it stuck out to me is cause now that you said that, I'm realizing more people are just playing, San Andreas and Call of Duty, or those are always the games that get brought up whenever we talk about violence, right?
Yeah, especially in the media, right?
Yeah, yeah, those are always the main games they push out. So imagine just those three games, right? But there's such a wide variety of other games, right? Who are doing good. It's doing good stuff, right? For good people, right? People might be playing like a fun kid game like Super Mario or something like that, and just to have
Yeah.
fun and be a kid. And you can't just take that away from them because of three games like GTA and Call of Duty and everything.
Right.
Yeah, it's just
Uh,
yeah. Go on. Sorry.
yeah. No, no worries. Do you notice any criticisms here or anything, maybe a weakness of one of these analyses?
Uh,
If you
I
don't,
don't.
it's fine.
Yeah, yeah. Other than them using the three same games over and over again, nah, I don't really see that much of a weakness.
Okay. So the only one criticism I have is, I guess, when I mentioned that crime was highest in the summer,
Hmm.
but we know in the summer people aren't really playing video games, so
Yep. Exactly.
I don't know if that even has any relation, and maybe they should have looked at the crimes in relation to the winter. But again, maybe that just supports the point that it doesn't even cause violence. Because if people aren't playing video games in the summer, then it can't cause any violence because it says crime is highest in the summer. So maybe that's more of a strength. So yeah, I'm not too sure if there's any uh
Weakness.
criticisms here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm yeah. So I guess we can move on here to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I found a few articles here. So I'm gonna pick one of them because uh they seem to talk generally about the same type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just gonna pick okay, I'm just gonna pick one here. Okay. So this study it looked at it wanted to see what was causing youth violence. It didn't really believe that the exposure to violent video games were the real cause of youth violence. So it wanted to look at a, a wide range of other effects such as gender, mental health, even social influences.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I chose this study because it is more diverse and it states the races of the uh, participants. So 49% of the participants were white, 21% were black, and 18% were Hispanic, and 12 were other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So what it was trying to look at is it 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 really wanted to see if there was another cause for violence amongst youth. So it focused on the family and social variables the most. It said ineffective parenting might may be the cause for like deviant behavior or deviant children, which is basically means children who are like acting out more, causing more trouble, uh, just I guess destroying more things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it said like yeah, parents could be one of the factors. I it also mentioned that the social factor. Like I even mentioned earlier, like yeah, sometimes it's harder for people to live a more decent life depending on their situation.
Exactly.
They may be yeah, they may be in a tough situation. Their parents might be in a tough situation where they struggle to make ends meet. So again, they may sometimes they have to do desperate things and it may seem to make them more deviant, but it's just their situation. It's just how they survive. So uh, this article focused on that as well. Uh, it also looked at attachment from parents. So they asked some of the participants if their parents ever said they were proud of them, if they felt that they could talk to their parents when they needed them, and some of them like I think it's something to include because many participants didn't feel that way, so they didn't feel supported by their parents or didn't have good attachment, which could also be possible reason for acting out or being aggressive in school. And
Mm-hmm.
another thing is yelling or name calling or threats. That was also they were also asked some of these participants about that because that could be a potential reason because adults in their home might be arguing. They may have bad experiences with parents. They may even be hit by their parents, and sometimes when they're hit, they let out these aggressive tendencies in school, and they hit someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it also mentioned the mentioned culture. It associated uh, uh, being in a lower socioeconomic status. Some parents may be less warm due to culture. They may hit their children. Yeah, and I mentioned like people in like different cultures or different races, such as black or even Hispanic or brown. Like their parents might be more aggressive, so they may hit their children and may have us like as I talked about again before, like people generally who are black, brown, Hispanic, they generally have a lower socioeconomic status. So
Mm-hmm.
parents are struggling. So it's a lot harder to be warm to your children as they're going through great difficulties. So and that could affect the children's aggressive tendency. So overall, this study really wanted to focus on how video games have not really any part to do with these uh violent tendencies of children, and it's more the parents and their social situation. So, do you have anything you want to add, or what do you think about this one?
Yeah, just one thing, like you like that example you said of like a kid's parents like hitting each other, or in like or hitting the kid, right? The kid, whenever he wants to get away, he or she wants to get away from that world of where they feel not loved, they can always go to a video game, right? And even maybe it might be a violent video game, right? But it's best for them to get their anger out and rage in that video game than to go to school and hit somebody else, because of something their parents
Yeah,
have done.
I agree. I think it does, but but yeah, but again, I guess one of the criticisms, I guess, for this article is like it does mention socioeconomic status, so maybe these kids don't even have the best of video games to play. They don't even have the consoles, or the
Mm-hmm.
video games might be lacking. Like there might be some video game on their phone or something. So maybe that could be a potential criticism. So
Could be.
as they can't afford these video games, so they might be playing these video games from the past that are very cheap, or even free video games, which I guess they aren't as fun. So
Mm-hmm.
it may be a maybe they can't let it out in these video games if they don't have any, or if it's harder to obtain the more fun games. Because let's face it, these, like I said before, uh, Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto, and even games like Fortnite, these are the most popular type of games. So, and they're more fun. So
Mm-hmm.
if they can't engage in these games, like maybe that's why they do let it out in school. So
Exactly.
but that's just one of the criticisms here.
No, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically. I think those were the two main arguments I had for video games, and now we're gonna basically draw our conclusions. So, what do you think? Do you are you on the side that video games do cause violence, or are you on the side that video games do not cause violence and aggression, etc.?
I'm on the side of I think video games do not cause aggression or violence, right? Or at least
Uh-huh.
any added aggression or violence, right? Because maybe the kid was already, you know, aggressive or violent before they even touched the video game, right? Um, but I'm definitely on the side that
Yeah.
video games don't cause that because video games, right? Everybody forgets there's a wide variety of video games, and it's not just those three of Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto. You know, there's more
Yeah.
to video games than just violence, and I think everybody just needs to see that. So I'm on the side of video games do not cause any added violence or
Yeah,
aggression.
I would say I'm more on that side as well. Yeah, and even as you mentioned, like those games, those three games you mentioned, they are always, even all these research I've done here, Call of Duty and GTA were almost mentioned a majority of times. Like I didn't really notice any other games getting mentioned. These games seem to be the most controversial. And another thing to build on one of the things you said is like you said that some of these kids might already be aggressive and maybe be a bit of a bully in school before video games, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I should say is like, and I want to say is that maybe some of these crimes that people commit has nothing to do with video games, because this person could have an antisocial personality, and antisocial personality basically means they have no regards for human life. They don't feel anything for human lives, and I don't if they're antisocial, I don't think video games will really have an influence. They're already feeling that way. They're gonna kill people just because they can, and they would feel no ways about it. So
Exactly.
and the reason I really sided more with this point that video games do not cause violence here is especially with the article which compared the statistics, and it looked specifically at those three video games which said cause the most violence and are the most controversial. There seemed to be a decrease in violence. So that's the one what really stood out to me, which made me feel this position is more right,
Mm-hmm.
and that video games do not cause violence. So yeah, that's and even the how I mentioned that there's all these other social factors family, environment. These are all things that can also influence aggression, and I think sometimes the media and researchers just want to find something to blame for mass shootings or murders, and unfortunately, they blame video games. So
Exactly.
yeah, is there anything else you want to add
No, I think you hit it right on the nail.
on the nail? Okay. uh, so I do want before we end, I do want to mention something.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's a concept called confirmation bias, right?
Mhm.
And I I basically I believe that we're a bit on the bias side because we we also played video games our whole lives, right?
Right.
And we I don't think we're violent people.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I think we're more, and we didn't really get become aggressive people. I would say we're pretty and good human beings out here. I hope,
Mhm.
and it's I hope. But yeah, yeah, I think there is a bit of maybe we do have a little bit of bias here, so because we did play these video games and violent ones as well, but we're still not like bad like bullies or uh sociopaths who kill people, so or even aggressive people. So
exactly.
I think our bi I think our bias might be a little we may be a little biased, but I think it's justified based on the articles that I mentioned and the other influences.
Mhm.
As yeah, because yeah, and generally we did have a good upbringing because yes, I've known Jonathan since we were uh kids, since we were like 4 years old,
Mhm.
and generally we had a bit of we had I it's we had a good upbringing, and we didn't really have uh like family issues or like environmental problems, which I think are on more of a cause of violence than video games. We had
Exactly.
a pretty good upbringing, so that's another strength we could say for why we think video games do not cause violence. So
Mhm.
yeah, is there anything else you want to add, or if you agree with me, or
I agree with you 100%. Everything you said was the truth.
right? So yeah, I think that covers it all. Uh, yeah, that's it, and I'll conclude with yeah. So we think video games do not cause violence, and that's the end of the debate and the podcast. Thank you.